Welcome to Behind the Firewall. I'm CNN teammate Carson Kennedy, here to discuss the latest in financial security with CNN's in-house experts. Today's guest is Amanda Reed, Client Contact Center Team Leader here at CNN. Amanda joined the show last July and had a great conversation about social media scams. Today, she's returned to discuss embracing the awkward. Facing scams or financial fraud is an emotional experience, and talking about it can be difficult. However, on the other side of that awkward, difficult conversation is the opportunity to learn and grow. In today's discussion, Amanda and I discuss the difference between fraud and scams, how scammers can use our own emotions against us, tips on how to approach difficult financial conversations with loved ones, and how to provide encouragement for those facing fraud. Without further ado, it's time to venture behind the firewall. So, Amanda, my first question is, how often does your team actually receive fraud or scam-related phone calls?
Well, it can vary, but fraud is something we hear about every day, often multiple times a day. For our contact center employees, it's not unusual to handle 3 or 4 separate fraud related conversations in a single day, which really underscores just how common these situations have become. One important distinction, Carson, I want to highlight is the difference between fraud and scams. With debit card fraud, customer involvement is typically not a factor. And on heavy days, a single contact center staff member might manage as many as 10 true fraud interactions, each involving unauthorized activity that the customer did not knowingly participate in. Scam interactions, while less frequent, are often more devastating. In these cases, the customer is manipulated into transacting themselves, which of course can lead to significant financial impacts, but also emotional impacts too. And while less frequent, we still encounter scam situations every day. And on high volume days, one employee may handle 3 or 4 of these difficult conversations alone.
Do you notice any recurring themes that occur when people call in to talk about suspected fraud or maybe recurring emotions and behaviors?
It really does vary because people are unique. When someone calls in about suspected fraud or a possible scam, we can see a wide range of emotions and behaviors. One person might become defensive, another might break down and feel completely overwhelmed, and someone else may be so embarrassed that it's hard for them to even talk about what happened. There's really no single reaction, and that's something we always try to keep in mind in the call center.
With all these different emotions kind of swirling around, do you think that victims of fraud are hesitant to tell other people or call in to the client contact center for help?
I can say with confidence, people are hesitant to call in. And I think many victims hesitate. Not everyone hesitates, but many hesitate. And that's really what we're striving to change here today. It's detrimental that hesitation is not something that helps you in these situations. It more hinders us from being able to help you and move forward.
For sure. What do you think it is about those conversations about financial safety or fraud attempts that make people feel so uncomfortable?
Well, I want to go back to the wide range of emotions. There's many different reasons, right? Our emotions do control us as much as like we don't want them to. They still do. And one of those that I mentioned was embarrassment. And embarrassment can stop people from reaching out, especially when it comes to finances. And those conversations can feel awkward or vulnerable. But unfortunately, that moment that we hesitate or the embarrassment holds us back is often the moment where fraudsters have an upper hand, or scammers can often make matters even worse by claiming they're the bank or the bank is involved. They can take advantage of those situations where we hesitate. So it's important to embrace it and move on as quickly as possible.
What tactics do these scammers use to purposefully emotionally manipulate people?
They create urgency, fear, or pressure so people feel like they have to react immediately. They'll pose as someone trustworthy or authoritative, not necessarily from the bank, but maybe a government official, or somebody from the Social Security Administration, which can lower people's guard, thinking that they're talking to someone they should be able to trust, and lead to further confusion and mistrust because they're not really talking to somebody trustworthy.
That's kind of like the text you'll get to where it'll say, "Oh, you have an outstanding traffic violation, and if you don't pay it by the end of the day, then you'll be fined like $10,000 or something." Like would you say that's an example of the sort of emotional manipulation?
Exactly. It's, oh my gosh, I would never want to do something like that. Never not pay something that I should have paid. It gets people to be like, oh my gosh, I have to go take care of this. And they think it's legitimate, they really do, but a lot of times those are scams, or leading you down a rabbit hole that you don't want to go down. So it is important to realize that hesitation can really hinder our progress here at the bank, and it can open doorways to the scammers and fraudsters.
Say, a listener or a customer of CNN was in that situation. What advice would you give to that person who thinks, maybe I'm being targeted by a scam, but they're feeling embarrassed that they fell for it, or they're just not sure, they're afraid to call in?
It is hard, and I've tried to have those conversations with people before. Sometimes you'll get lucky and people will just bite the bullet, so to speak. So I would tell them that's exactly what they have to do, is to call anyway, even if they feel embarrassed or scared. Those feelings are very normal. I would have them too, but they're exactly what scammers count on. They know we're going to have those feelings, and that's where they're taking advantage. I will say you're not alone. You're not being judged by us. We are reaching high levels every day. Like we talked about earlier, call levels every day are increasing. You're not the only one we're talking to. So there's no need to feel embarrassed. It really does happen to a lot of us. And reaching out early gives us the best chance to help. I can't stress that enough. And sometimes just talking it through can make a huge difference. It can lead to us discovering that you actually got a message, and that message is spoofing us here at CNN, which we can then go to our information security team and have that number taken completely down so they can't spoof us anymore, and they can potentially stop the scammers from hurting other individuals.
I find that interesting about the spoofed messages, pretending to be CNN potentially. So if someone were to receive a suspicious message and say it says, it's from CNN, and they think it's a scam, but they aren't quite sure, what advice would you give them on like how to verify whether that's real or not? What do they do? What do they say?
Well, the first thing you're going to want to do is remember to pause, to take a deep breath, think it through. If a message feels suspicious, there is no obligation to respond right away, even if it is from the bank. Don't click links. I can't stress that one enough. Don't provide information, and don't engage. Just pause. Trust your instincts and verify the message through a trusted independent source. That might mean calling the number on the back of your debit card or reaching out directly to your bank through a known contact who works here. Slowing things down can make all the difference because scammers rely on urgency to push people into quick action. If you were to receive a message about a potential fraudulent transaction, even after hours, the odds are good that the card has already been blocked by us as a precaution. But you can always call the number on the card to confirm or block it yourself to be safe. Once we're here, we're open, you've got us on the phone. We are here to help you. We're here to help you walk through what happened and sort everything out. We're not going to leave you high and dry. We'll hold your hand the whole way.
So I'd like to change gears a little bit. A couple episodes ago, I talked about AI scams that target seniors and senior citizens, older customers of CNN. They can unfortunately be targeted by scams. What are some ways that we can approach conversations with maybe older family members about scams or finances? Say we suspect that maybe they are being targeted by a scam. How can we approach these sort of awkward conversations without sounding condescending, or maybe our older family member, getting defensive? Like, do you have any advice about how to approach those conversations?
Well, first of all, those conversations are extremely hard to have. And you always have to go in knowing that and give yourself the grace to say, I'm doing a hard thing, and grace for the other person on the other end as well. It really helps coming from a place of love and concern instead of authority, I guess is a great way to put it. Nobody, no matter what their age, really wants to feel talked down to. Keeping the conversation open by like asking questions and being curious rather than accusatory, even going as far as like you did, Carson, and giving examples like, hey, I got a message from my bank the other day, have you ever gotten any like that? And then finally just listening to them, listening to what they say, can make it feel more collaborative, like you're coming to them, we're working on this together, we're both in the same boat kind of situation. So when people feel respected and supported, they're much more likely to stay engaged and receptive. I often find when I'm talking with our older customers, it's really important to, even though you may start seeing the emotions rise up in them and anxiety coming, it's important to keep it going and maybe direct the conversation in a slightly different direction to help ease the anxiety. Let's say, for example, you're talking to a customer or you're a loved one. I'm sorry, you're talking to a loved one, and you're discussing with them that there have been some charges on their bank account that you've noticed that are not normal. They've never appeared there in the past, on the past statements. They're small dollar amounts that they don't seem right for your loved one. So instead of saying, what are all these charges? Something I've never seen you do before, which is like an accusatory tone, we can say, huh, there's a bunch of charges on your account that have me a little concerned. Do you know what they're about? Have you seen them before? And that right there can keep the conversation from going off the deep end. It often leads to a place of mutuality. When people feel respected and supported, they're much more likely to stay engaged and receptive.
So, my last question for today is, how can we reframe these sort of awkward situations as not a bad thing necessarily, but more as an opportunity to learn or grow.
I think most of us naturally dread awkward conversation, and that hesitation is there for a reason. Awkward moments can sometimes feel that way because there is a fear that there is going to be judgment. However, if we recognize this reaction and reframe it, it's almost like an internal alert system. Something inside us saying, hey, pay attention. Something here matters. A great way to look at these types of conversations is as a chance to overcome a fear or overcome a mistake and emerge stronger. And if we can remember that in those moments where we react to fear, we can remind ourselves, okay, I will get out of this situation. There is a way forward, and I'm going to learn something along the way.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your perspective with us today. I think this is a topic that isn't really discussed enough. So, awkward or emotional conversations can be difficult, but it's like you said, it's not necessarily easy, but it has to be done, and so the sooner the better. Thank you again, Amanda, for joining the show today and discussing.
Thank you for having me so much. I will come back anytime. I love being here. I I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Firewall. If you enjoyed this episode, like, follow, and share the podcast with a friend. For more cybersecurity and money armor resources, visit cnbankpa.com and follow CNN on Facebook and Instagram. In the meantime, stay safe and stay tuned for next month's episode.